Hi, this is Dr. Kimberley Linert, and you're listening to Incredible Life Creator Podcast. My guest today is Sajita Setia. Sajita Setia, MD, is a clinical biochemist and pharmaceutical physician, certified by King's College London. Prior to starting Transform Medical Communications in New Zealand, Sajita was head of medical affairs for a pharmaceutical company in Singapore. A physician by training, she has spent over 16 years in healthcare, including 10 years in the pharmaceutical industry. She has authored numerous scientific manuscripts and textbooks for medical students and published many clinical papers in collaboration with regional and global key opinion leaders. Sajita is also mental health and positive psychology enthusiast and founder of Transforming Life, a digital platform to boost mental health and emotional well-being using scientific and proven metacognitive insights, knowledge, and practices. She has launched exclusive content to boost motivation and morale amidst COVID-19 crisis on her YouTube channel. Welcome to the podcast, Sajita.
Thank you so much, Kimberly. Thank you for the lovely introduction as well.
Yes. And that was quite an introduction. You have done so much work in your area. So besides the professional side, we always like to find out about people's personal side. So why don't you start out and tell us, where you grew up, how you started out, how you got into what you're doing today.
Sure, thank you. So I grew up in India. I did my medicine in India and my post-graduation. My subspecialty training was in clinical chemistry or lab medicine. And then I moved to Singapore 13 years back. And I spent almost a decade there working for various pharmaceutical companies and being a pharmaceutical physician. So I got to work with government decision makers. I got into a lot of research as well. And it was a fabulous journey. I accompanied my husband most of the times wherever he moved, and I moved along with him. And when we moved to New Zealand close to 2 years back, there weren't much options for me, so I started my own agency for medical communications, Transform Medical Communications, which has been going great. And starting a new career, as you know, is not easy. And I got in touch, with spirituality, with psychology, and I saw a very different situation here in New Zealand. Growing up in India and living in Singapore, it was pretty Asian community, and a lot of things were not so heard of, for example, substance abuse. And I came to very close with families who were affected with substance abuse, drug dependence, and I realized it's so rampant here. It's so wide, it's so deep, and it's everywhere. So I got into research related to mental health burden, and I initiated from my side, a peer network with leading mental health specialists from New Zealand. And I was deeply touched with the mental health burden. It has always been there, but there was within me, I have to do something about it. Why can't we all find happiness within ourselves? It has always been a passion, and I was just driven to start something and setting up businesses. I had some experience with my own venture, and I thought, maybe I should start another one. I was already very busy, and everybody was like, are you sure you want to do it? And I said, this is within me. I have to drive it. And with this, I started Transforming Life, and especially with the COVID-19 pandemic crisis, I felt there has never been a better time to start it, and I have to do something about it. So this is how we started up with Transforming Life, and I'm very pleased to inform that soon there would be a big merger, and we are rather collaborating with the Global Mental Health Association to globalize Transforming Life. So I was contacted by the founder, Mansi Dhalokia, who is also a mental health advocate, and there are many mental health experts from around the globe, from from US, UK, South Africa, Dubai, India, and myself. So we are hoping to launch a global association very soon, and this is the right time to do it. There has never been more important and urgent task, especially with this crisis, to boost productivity, efficiency, happiness, because we know that the world is in crisis, especially with the mental health problems. And the crisis was even much before COVID-19 pandemic, but maybe this pandemic is going to transform the social norms and bring something good out of it, that we start accepting and implementing the basic self practices for boosting our mental health with a population-wide, widespread way.
Wow. So you started out in India and then Singapore and then New Zealand. So what's the difference when you went from country to country? They all sound like very different cultures, all three of them.
Yeah, they are indeed. But I believe people everywhere are the same. We want love, affection, closeness. India is more conservative, and I was always protected and shadowed by my parents, family. It was a lovely experience growing up. Singapore is highly driven, productivity driven, efficient, and very, very competitive. New Zealand is very laid back, but I work very hard because I'm used to that lifestyle. They're all lovely places to live in. In terms of mental health, I would say the problems are also very deep and still the same. There is definitely a lot of stigma in Asia, even in Singapore. People don't want to talk about their mental health. Even GPs, they don't want to see patients with mental health disorders because of the stigma, and they present with a lot of somatic symptoms. Asians and even ethnic minorities here in Australia and New Zealand, because it's in our culture. We need to be strong. We cannot be emotionally weak, and we know that this is very common. Patients present to GPs. They rather they're suffering from anxiety and depression, and they undergo a lot of invasive diagnostics, which is very expensive, and many times it's not even diagnosed, unfortunately. So with this, I felt that this is the time that we start talking about it. There is, of course, in developed Western countries, including New Zealand, there's a lot of awareness, and there are a lot of efforts in place for mental health. And government is doing a lot. I'm sure everywhere, but here they are openly doing a lot, spending a lot of money. But the problem comes down to substance abuse. I think the efforts are futile. There's so much of illegal market that when I came to know, I was really surprised, and it affected me so much personally, because growing up in India and living in Singapore, it wasn't so commonly spoken or heard of, and it's probably not so common also, as far as I know. Singapore, the laws are so strict that we rarely hear these stories, but here it's like so common. People grow cannabis, and on social media we would see all the misleading posts about substances, advertising that they can do anything, from curing cancer to, curing pain and mood, fixing the mood. So teenagers and young people, they tend to abuse, and drug dependence is common. And a lot of money is spent, in healing the families, the relationships, and children who are affected. But I just don't understand, why don't we drive efforts to just remove it? I know it's not easy and it's so complicated, but probably it's the time to do it. And these problems are going to rapidly escalate with the COVID-19 pandemic, and further affect the productivity, and again, cascade a very vicious cycle for the financial crisis.
Yes, and so you grew up in an Asian, culture where you don't want to admit there's something mentally wrong, and I think that it's somewhat similar everywhere. I mean, even here, it's okay if you go ask for some Prozac or something, but beyond that, it's not that accepted. So if someone is feeling really depressed or sad, or they know they're not thriving as far as mentally, emotionally, what would you say to them to encourage them to actually get help?
Well, I believe we need to create brand awareness about mental health so that it's so openly spoken about in schools, in workplaces, and universities, and even come out with strategies, simple mindfulness or metacognition based proven cognitive behavioral therapy, which can be adapted on a population basis so that people are not hesitant and they talk about it. Otherwise, we are going to face a world where, half of the generation is either abusing substances or taking antidepressants, prescribed medicines to manage their mood. And we do not want to live in a world like this. We want this to be spoken, in all social media. Come out and seek help. These are some of the strategies that can be implemented in organizations for boosting mental health. So I have been researching a lot about positive psychology, and it is such a blessing. There is so much of abundance in positive psychology because our happiness lies in our hands. It's within us. Nobody can make us sad without our permission, but it doesn't happen because, when I was growing up, it was a very spiritual atmosphere and I loved it. But nobody gave me a justification. Why should I think positive? What would happen if I think negative, or if I become very sad, and how can I not become sad when it seems like situations are not in my favor? But all these strategies are not taught, and after reading up, and because my specialty is medical communications and simplifying the complex information into easy, captivating info using graphics and stuff, so I started coming out with my own graphics and captivating and connecting the knowledge and the evidence behind it. And even teaching my kids, their friends, and even kids can learn a lot, and it's recommended by Dr. Martin Seligman, the father of positive psychology, that we should be teaching these strategies before children hit puberty, because it's the teenage years which are associated with most of the high risk activities, and leading to when they go to the young age, these may continue. And we know that the mental health disorders and substance abuse, it peaks, in the young age, which are the most productive years. So then I felt we have to come out with strategies on a global level, and starting in school. I know this is very personal because spirituality as such is very personal, and many a times there are religious knowledge and practices which are provided by schools which have their own importance. But more than that, the proven simple positive psychology, cognitive behavioral therapy designed for particular age groups, they can really transform the world where we live in, because we know how to find our happiness. And a lot of stuff related to bullying, substance abuse, the high risk behavior, they can be reduced. And with the ongoing mental health crisis, it has been said that no matter how much funding is available, even if we double it, triple it, we cannot even prevent and treat half of the mental health disorders. So we need innovation here. We have to come together on finding the right strategies. I know the strategies, of course, may differ based on the region and the ethnicity. There might be some lot more stigma in some countries, so we have to look at the right approach and tactics, and I'm sure there are, but it's time that we all come together and work on it, coming out with global policies, because all this is related, and not just mental disorders, also substance abuse, because they are together. It will influence productivity, efficiency, happiness, especially to cope with adversities. And we saw what happened with COVID-19 pandemic, you see, and these adversities will come in future, but we need to empower ourselves to be able to cope up, using the skill sets that we learn in our life. And the earlier they are introduced, of course, we know they have much better response rates if we introduce these interventions early. So we do not really need to segregate who has a problem and who doesn't, because I believe everybody does to some extent. It's about teaching everybody the simple strategies. Yeah.
True. So let's just back up a little bit, because some of the time you're talking, I'm like, you're throwing out a lot of terms here. So what is positive psychology? So when you're talking about positive psychology and the tools that come along with it, what are you talking about?
So positive psychology basically relates to the fact that happiness is within us, and it gives the ownership of the mood and happiness to the individuals. So this is the concept of positive psychology. And when I try to relate spirituality with positive psychology, I found a lot of connection there. You see, most of the times we struggle to change people or change the situations which are beyond our control. So most of the times our mood is affected by external circumstances which we cannot control, we cannot change, and we lose a lot of energy, efficiency, productivity, thinking about or even sometimes taking actions to change them. And the wisdom to know what I can change and what I cannot comes with mindful decisions and choices. So I need to be mindful to be able to apply it. So I read a lot of, cognitive behavioral therapies and the simple approaches. And there are also simple practices recommended, for example, by Dr. Martin Seligman. And I would recommend, reading the book on learned optimism and the optimistic child to everybody. It's a very simple book. It follows the positive psychology practices, but it's written in a very simple language that most of us can understand. So he proposed this ABCDE model, which refers to adversity. So this COVID-19 pandemic is an adversity, we all know, but in our day-to-day lives, there are a lot of adversities which many individuals term them as adversities, like, your boss is mad at you, there's traffic jam, your kids are having tantrums. These are all adversities. So based on the adversities, some thoughts are cascaded in my mind, and a lot is very much into subconscious mind and how I react with the situation, and different individuals react differently. We know that. And there are a lot of factors, it's not just genetic or personality traits. It's also how they were brought up, their environment around them. But based on the adversity, so I create a belief. And it's actually an illusion. So there's no reality. The reality is imposed by my own thoughts. So if I change my thinking style, the reality would look different. So based on adversity, I have belief cascaded by my self-talk, because I talk to myself. That is called my explanatory style, the explanation I give to any situation or adversity in life. So based on my belief or my thinking, my style of thinking, there are consequences, for the emotional consequences, for example, sadness, anger, jealousy, or good consequences, positive emotions. So the consequences, my emotions are generated by my thinking process, by my self-talk. And it's very, very hard to understand your self-talk, because the thoughts are, cascaded like a rapid, firing. They come so fast, and we have like gnats or ants, the automated negative thoughts, which come really fast. They are uninterrupted. We cannot even, slow down, because we are not aware that, these thoughts are coming so fast. So the easiest method, which when I apply it, is actually when I feel it, that I don't feel right, I don't feel happy, I feel really sad or whatever, I go back and check my thinking style. What was I thinking? Rather than trying to control the situation, trying to control people around me, I go back and check my thinking. And I try to dispute my negative thinking style. So it's the D there, disputation. And there's also distraction, we know that when we talk to people we love, our close friends, when we don't feel good, we feel better. Or we, take a warm shower or read a book. This is distraction. But disputation is much more powerful when I dispute, because I'm actually correcting my unconscious mind there, this is wrong. Maybe I can think in a different way, So when I do that, there is something called energization, E. That means I get, a boost in my mood. So why do I get a boost in my mood? Is because I'm changing my thinking style. I'm not changing people around me. I'm not changing the circumstances. I'm just changing my thinking style. And of course, it's not easy. We are all on this journey. But these practices, when we introduce this in younger age, they have far more impact to an individual's life. of course, in general, to society as well. And now it's the time, because it's contagious, right? Negative thinking style is contagious. Everybody is thinking really, really negative, about the financial insecurities and physical insecurities, what would happen. We really don't know how long this would continue. So probably COVID-19 pandemic is giving us an opportunity to change our thinking style, to accept these practices from positive psychology, which have been existing for very long time. But why do we have to really suffer from depression and anxiety to go to a psychologist? We all do. From moment to moment we feel sad, and now I'm sure it's much more than normal. So why can't we introduce these practices in a wide scale, so that everybody can benefit in a simple terms, of course, to school children, in universities, and in healthcare. We know that, it's proven that when you manage the mind, you empower the mind, the body also responds positively. And there are a lot of somatic complaints, related to physical illness, which are triggered by style of thinking. And even your immunity is affected by style of thinking. We really don't know how exactly it happens. There has been a lot of research, but biochemical basis, we don't really know for sure. They are hypotheses. But of course, we have to empower people by changing their thinking style, and all the psychological therapies and psychotherapies, they are aimed to boost optimism. So learned optimism, learned resilience can indeed transform, our life. And once I transform, the world around me transforms. I can't change others, I can't change the situations, but probably we can change our thinking style. And with less worries about future, staying in the present, visualizing a good future and learning from the past, but enjoying the present moment. Your body is going to heal, with all those thoughts, and empowering your mind. And of course, we know that our productivity is affected when we are sad or depressed. The wrong emotions, it affects our productivity, and the right emotions, they push us.
Yeah. So if you wanted to implement something, let's say in the school with elementary students, or any students of any age, would you just want to teach those concepts, or how do you think would be the best way to actually integrate it so that people are actually doing it, the students or people at at their workplaces or wherever they are? How would be the best way to help them actually implement it?
There can be many approaches, and I did discuss with few teachers from primary school, and I got very good feedback from most of them, and they said these practices would be helpful. There are Bible classes or sometimes religious classes which have their own importance. But when we talk about really shaping the mind, the young minds, teaching them how to accept adversities and respond positively towards day-to-day situations in life. The homeroom teachers, this is a feedback that I got from primary school teachers, the homeroom teachers would be really appropriate. So, but again, it comes down to training the teachers first. And of course, the materials need to be different. If we are talking about primary school versus high school or universities, the complexity would be different, so that children can learn, from simple facts. And peer-to-peer counseling is very important. Children who have learned it, demonstrated it, can teach to other children, what it means to them. And I believe we can also try to, identify, the high risk group there, and really target them, because there are some children who come from, families with domestic violence, and, or they have health issues. So they are definitely more prone for mental health disorders, and also for substance abuse. So of course, the efforts needs to be much more intense in them. But I feel, and also the same is recommended by Dr. Martin Seligman, that they should be introduced, starting from very early in life. I would say probably 7-8 years old, since the time they have really good cognitive thinking and they can practice it. And it's easier if we implement it early. But of course, we don't have to implement just for the school-age children. Also in universities, it should be a part of curriculum, I believe. So there's a call on government and decision makers. We cannot do it ourselves to start introducing this in their curriculum. And I'm sure there are many NGOs who would love to help partner together to create customized modules based on the age group. And also for young working professionals, it has to be different, what it provides them, because there's so much of medical evidence there that it boosts productivity, it boosts efficiency, learned optimism and resilience. So why not the workplaces can implement them? We do a lot about team building, and a lot of money and funds are spent for these activities. Why not also spare some funding for positive psychology, cognitive behavioral therapy to impact to enhance the mood for the working professionals as well. And social media, I believe, is a valuable platform because the substance abuse industry, it's growing faster than Amazon and Apple. It's really scary, the speed at which it's growing. And with the mental health crisis, which already has been existing, it's underappreciated, under-recognized, and now it's creating, there would be a cascade of a lot of further mental health problems. And I'm sure substance abuse industry will again gain its shares. But we don't want that to happen. We don't want our children to be, trapped by all this misleading information. So social channels are a valuable platform because we know that young individuals, most of them are all social platform. They're actually doing it much more than what is required. So why not we introduce these practices, peer-to-peer counseling through social media? I think that can also really have valuable returns. Yeah.
Yeah, and you talked about, people with substance abuse, and then, I know it's actually really common for someone who has depression or some mental health issue to go in to see their doctor, and they give them a drug, which can be abused. So how do you think how could we change that so that people aren't just going from one drug to another?
There is a chemical imbalance, I believe, from my medical training, and I'm not a psychiatrist, so I wouldn't judge them. I'm sure they do the right practices when it's needed, but depression is basically associated with chemical imbalance. But if you go in terms of positive psychology, depression is also an extreme of pessimism. Depressed people generally think really, really negative. They have self-harm behavior towards the end, and all these medicines will correct the chemical imbalance, which is important because the mindfulness and the cognitive behavioral therapy takes time to act, so we can't wait. We really want to prevent self-harm behavior. So I'm sure there is a role of medicines and antidepressants, provided they are given by a healthcare professional who is licensed to do that, and they have a big role, but they cannot be for a lifetime basis. We want people to come out of it, and cognitive behavioral therapy and mindfulness based practices, they have been proven not just for boosting mood and reducing the severity of depression, making people come out of antidepressants and being productive, but also for substance abuse. And we know that the response rate of various treatments, whether medical treatments or even psychological treatments, is very poor for substance abuse. Recurrence and relapse is very common. So in this case, it is even more important to think about prevention and boosting, mood through the positive psychology interventions. And that's what, we are really afraid of for the next generation, depending on how is it going. If you look at the high risk behavior in teenagers and in young individuals, I'm sure substance abuse will continue to rise, and we need really good collective efforts to stop it, because they really don't know, they are stigmatized, or they want easy help, so they are looking at substances to boost their mood. But antidepressants have a unique role, and I'm sure that they are needed when they are prescribed, for sure. But again, I'm sure if we come to the preventive psychiatry or preventive psychology, we can definitely look at reducing number of patients who actually need treatment, because I can self-heal myself, or go to workshops that influence me or teach me strategies where I can work. And again, caregivers can also be trained to do that. And GP practices, I think general practitioners, because they are the primary care vehicles where most of us would go first to our GP. But nobody really talks about positive psychology. It would be very uncommon that you visit a doctor and doctor tells you that, why don't you practice these, for your diarrhea or your gut pain or wherever, your chronic pain. And we know that, irritable bowel syndrome, a lot of fibromyalgia, chronic pain, fatigue, they are in turn to, linked to depression and anxiety. And for years and years, patients are being treated with a lot of medicines, thinking that these are somatic problems, but actually they are related to the mind. So not just schools and universities, even healthcare, GP practices, we need health coaches. It could be nurses. I know GPs generally don't have that much time to spend. It could be nurses, counselors who can train people, teach people, and integrated mental health is very important. And again, the social workers come there. And there's a lot of literature talking about the advantages. It's immense. When people think positive and they're optimistic, I'm talking about learned optimism, because optimism is also a trait. Some people are born optimistic, but we can learn to be more optimistic and resilient in life. So they're actually physical problems reduce. Chronic health problems, they are much less found in those individuals who have a positive, self-explanatory style. Their self-talk is much more positive. They have better relationships. They have, higher income. They have, better job security. People like to stay with them, work with them. And even if they end up suffering from depression, these are really well conducted prospective studies. Even they end up suffering from depression, they need much less antidepressants and they are able to come out of it much faster. So just because somebody is optimistic does not mean that that person will not have problems in life. The person may also have problems in life, but it is more probable that the person would be able to cope much better. Even for cancer patients, I think there are multiple studies related to this, that those who are optimistic and resilient, they have better outcomes, better clinical outcomes, because it's also your willpower. You see, so your optimistic style affects your willpower, your self-esteem, a lot of our decisions in life. And when we are faced with adversities, when we apply the principles of positive psychology, day-to-day adversity, your project was supposed to go this way, it happened this another way, you're stuck in traffic jam, there is lockdown, your kids cannot go to school, you have to catch up with a lot of work. These are day-to-day adversities, which are, of course, precipitated to a big extent right now with the COVID-19 crisis. But I think it's a very good time for everybody to implement these strategies, because everybody needs help at this point of time, I would say. And I also did, day to day. I'm not saying that I'm always very happy and, I never feel sad. I'm also a human. I also make mistakes. But what has helped me is actually going back and finding what is the cause of a negative emotion? What is the cause of this feeling? Because the cause is within me. What was I thinking that led to this feeling? And what can I do about it? Is my worry or anxiety, is it probable or is it possible? And what can I change? I should not be wasting my time trying to think about something which I cannot change. So if it is probable, maybe I have to act. Maybe, my strategy should be linked to what can I do so that, some wrong situation does not come in front of me. Like if I'm prone to lose my job or my financial security, then I should be working on the strategies, how I can, prevent it. Maybe, if the job market is really slow or down right now, maybe it's time for me to do some courses, because we know this situation is not going to last forever. It will recover, there will be definitely recovery in next few years. So my strategies would be very different, and I would be aimed. I will not be wasting my time being worried, being anxious. And we know all the businesses have been impacted, and I am also, I also run business, and I also have bank loans because I just bought a house, a really big house in Auckland just before the lockdown. And so I also have sort of a financial crisis. Things are not going the way I planned, and especially smaller businesses are suffering. But again, with crisis comes innovation. You see, all the biggest businesses were built during economic downturn. Microsoft, Google, Disney, they all come during economic downturn. So if I look at the history, I look at the past, my strategies are going to be different. And if it is just a possibility, it's not probable, then my strategies would be different. The problem is, it's the wisdom to differentiate. Is it possible or is it probable? Because most of the times our worries are only possibilities. They are not probabilities. And we waste a lot of time and effort trying to change it, or, being worried about it when it's just a possibility. So the wisdom comes from mindful choices, mindful decisions, staying in present. Mindfulness just refers to being aware of my thinking, my thoughts. And metacognition means I'm thinking about what I'm thinking, which is a higher level. And it's so important, because I don't think what I think, and I think, and it goes really a negative cascade of uninterrupted thoughts, and it becomes a reality for me. So that's why I said reality is actually not reality, because I'm creating a false reality by just overthinking or by being worried.
So several things you were saying was resonating with me. One was, don't stay still, move forward, make a new strategy, and at least go one step in a direction. And if you stepping in that direction is not working, then we're going to have to change or pivot or turn or do something. But with that positive expectation that we're expecting good things. We're not expecting bad things, because everyone, like you said, is in the same situation. We're all in the same, different, but we're still dealing with the same situation. So I really liked those points. And other thing I was thinking about is, you talked about peer-to-peer, people kind of helping each other. I know some of us are still in lockdown. Some of us are a lot freer. I know here in the United States, like people in California aren't barely allowed to leave their homes, where in Georgia, we're all pretty much going out and doing whatever we want, and the restaurants are opening and the gyms are opening, and so things are opening up. But so we have different levels. But how important is it for people to somehow get together, even if it's online, somehow to have support? Because sometimes your thoughts, even though you might want to go into the positive thought, and I know if I think something negative, I'm going to have a belief and I'm going to feel bad. But sometimes people get in that spot where they can't get out by themselves, and let's say they don't want to see a doctor. How is it that we can help each other with that?
Well, I'm sure governments are working, a lot. There are helplines. What works for me, if it's not so bad situation, is actually thinking about the consequences. So when I have wrong emotions and wrong thinking style, I bring and I emerge consequences, because from my own research, and it's proven, we are all aware, and from our own experiences, when we are really worried or, we have wrong emotions, including sadness, jealousy, it affects our productivity. And it's not just productivity, it's the release of stress hormones. I cannot take mindful decisions. So I tell myself, when I'm not in the correct emotional state, that emotional state will not allow me to make accurate decisions. And if I don't make accurate decisions, it's going to jeopardize my relationships, it's going to jeopardize my business, my work. And if you cannot, I say the same thing about meditation. Meditation helps you relax, because all the worries are deep rooted. They come from your unconscious mind. Even if before you realize, all the wrong thoughts start coming to you, because it's a deep practice going on, and you can't shape your mind in few seconds or days. It comes with practice. But again, if you feel that these practices are not helping, please visit a mental health specialist, because it's very important. And sometimes it should be the first step, because you wouldn't know if you don't have any resources available, especially if you don't have family members to help you. It is always better if you get the help early, because we know that it affects, the recovery. It's much easier if you come in the early stage rather than in the late stage. So go and seek. Please don't be stigmatized. Please don't feel bad about it.
Well, so much wisdom. Thank you so much. And where can people find you? I know you have a new website. How can people contact you?
So you can reach out to me directly if you are looking for any training your teams about productivity, efficiency, in general about mental health, advocacy or promotion. And we would be soon merging into a global organization, Global Mental Health Association. So we are really hoping to come out with global strategies to be implemented in healthcare, in workplaces and schools and universities, so that, people can really benefit when it's really the time to discuss and inculcate these habits.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. And I know people will be thinking about what you said and how they can stay positive and keep looking towards their goals and keep looking towards what they want to happen in their life. So thank you so much.
It was my pleasure, Kimberly. Thank you for having me here.
All right. We'll talk to you again soon.
See you. Bye-bye.